Shabbat Shalom. It was a tough week for the Jews. About a week ago now, a Palestinian opened fire just outside the old city, injuring many Israelis who were there just to pay their respects at the holiest site of the Jewish people. And also this week, Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority for something like 20 years because he's done with elections, in Germany, he announced that the Israelis, the Jews, the Zionists, had committed 50 Holocausts against the Palestinians. In Germany, where 6 million Jews were systematically murdered, he had the chutzpah to announce that the Zionists had committed 50 Holocausts against the Palestinians. And I was thinking about this week because I wanted to talk to you one more time about my trip to Israel. This Hebrew month of Av is coming to an end, and I've had the honor of sharing with you some of my experiences there in the Promised Land. We've spoken about why Israel, about Israel as a place where Jews can be safe, about Israel as a place where we can fulfill our religious dreams, and about Israel as a place where we can aspire to create a truly holy society. And then, of course, this last time I spoke, I offered you thoughts on power and responsibility, the challenges and the blessings that come with both. And this Shabbos, I wanted to talk about making peace. Parts of me are saying, these are the people with whom we're supposed to make peace? Other parts of me are saying, these are the people with whom we're supposed to make peace. It was an amazing time for me in Israel this past summer. I'll admit to you that among the many highlights, perhaps the best highlight for me was when I got to hang out with Marley and Jane and 11 other college students from Sha'ar Tzedek who were there in Israel, experiencing so much of what Israel has to offer. Yes, I got a great view of the Mediterranean Sea because we were right on the beach. And yeah, the dinner was pretty good. But I got to hang out with these amazing young adults. First of all, they make me feel cool because I get there, look at them, they're cool. I got to feel a little bit cool hanging out with them. But they're there in Israel having this amazing experience. And it's what it's all about, right? It's what it is all about. The second highlight for me, and I use the word because I'm not sure what else to call it, but the second most interesting experience I think I had while in Israel was my last full day about a month ago now. I got to travel to Hebron. Now, maybe you know there are considered 4 holy, truly holy cities in the land of Israel. Can you name them? Jerusalem, first one that comes to mind, Tzfat, Tiberias, and Hebron. I've had the pleasure of visiting Jerusalem, Tiberias, and Tzfat a lot. But all my trips to Israel, and I'm blessed to have gone many times, I'd never been to Hebron. Hebron, as they say in English. I've never been to Hebron. I've driven near it because I think it's in Ohio or Indiana, just off the highway as you go. But there's actually a real Hebron 20 miles south of Jerusalem. And so sure enough, on that last full day that we were there, about 20 of us, rabbis from all over North America, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, a few Israeli rabbis, loaded a bulletproof bus, because that's how you have to travel through the West Bank to get to Hebron. And in front sat a very visibly armed security guard to keep us safe, because that's what you need in order to travel to Hebron. And as we passed through, we learned about areas A, B, and C, and what is the difference in the West Bank between Area A, Area B, and Area C. We passed Bethlehem. We passed cities where they said these are Jewish cities in the West Bank. We passed cities where they said these are Palestinian cities in the West Bank. And then we came to Hebron. And Hebron needs its own rules because it doesn't fit into areas A, B, and C. Hebron is its own thing. There's H1 and there's H2. And we can talk about what those are. But I want to just invite for a second, what does it mean that here in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, there are Palestinian cities and there are Jewish cities? And I want to ask the question with you, a question that I don't really have an answer for this Shabbat, but a question, a legitimate question to ask you. Is the peace we envision in the Middle East a peace like we have here in the United States, where we have pluralism, ethnic pluralism, and racial pluralism, and religious pluralism, and we set as our ideal here in the United States that everybody can live together in peace, no matter who your neighbor is, no matter what their background is, no matter what they believe, no matter what their skin color? That is what our ideal is here in the United States. Can it be the ideal in Israel? Can it be the ideal in the Middle East? Is that what peace is going to look like? Is it fair to project American-style peace onto the Middle East? Or is their peace going to look like something else entirely? Is their peace going to look different entirely? That's a question I want to reflect on with you. Because when we arrived in Hebron, we knew that our destination would be the cave of Machpelah. Just curious, how many of you have ever visited the cave of Machpelah? And I don't mean the cemetery on Woodward in Ferndale. Right? The cave of Machpelah. We knew we were heading there. It is the place where, according to Jewish tradition, Abraham and Sarah are buried, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. It is among the holiest sites to Jews and to Muslims. And did you know for 800 years, Jews were forbidden from entering Machpelah? For 800 years, Jews were forbidden from entering Machpelah, this among our holiest of sites. The Midrash even tells us that there's a portal to the Garden of Eden there at the cave of Machpelah. And we were forbidden 800 years from entering. Massacre upon massacres were committed against the Jews. And it was only in 1967, with the end of the Six-Day War, that we could finally go into the tomb that is at Machpelah. And did you know that the tomb got a lot of different generations to it, but it actually goes back to King Herod, just like the Western Wall. Same blocks, 2,000 years. And Herod built on sites that preceded it. Amazing. And did you know that there are certain sections of this tomb at Machpelah where only Jews are allowed to go? And there are certain sections at Machpelah where only Muslims are allowed to go. Because how do you achieve peace in the Middle East? You keep people separate. Because, by the way, about 25 years ago, Baruch Goldstein, may his name be forgotten, came in and massacred Muslims worshiping at their holy place too. The way we bring peace in America is by trying to force people together to understand each other. The way they're trying to bring peace in the Middle East is by keeping everybody separate from one another. I'll tell you though, for me, I'm not really a cemetery guy. It was interesting visiting the cave of Machpelah. The highlight for me was when our guide took us to the heights of Hebron. And she said, here is where the archaeological excavations are taking place. And if Abraham bought this land, by the way, the first land purchased by Abraham in the Holy Land, right? The first land purchased by a Hebrew in the Promised Land was right there. She said, it's here. This is where Abraham would have met with Ephron the Hittite and didn't even negotiate him down for real estate price. Paid the full price. It was there. That was cool. That was holy for me. That was sacred. But this city of Hebron, come to learn, has areas, streets, where only Jews are allowed to walk. That area, Hebron, has streets where only Palestinians are allowed to walk. And what does it mean in the 21st century after the Holocaust that there are areas where Jews are forbidden from walking in the Promised Land? What does it mean in the 21st century after the Holocaust that there are areas where Jews forbid others from walking in the Promised Land? I want to dive into the Torah a little bit with you as we reflect on what does it mean to bring peace to the Middle East, and what does it mean to bring peace to Eretz Yisrael. And first, if you'll turn with me to the very back of your Eitz Chaim Chumashim. I'm on the page after 1512. Now, one might assume that that is page 1513, but it is in fact not page 1513. It's merely the page after 1512. You'll take my word for it. And here you see the land of Canaan, the land of Israel during the time of Abraham to Moses. And I want to call your attention to the area marked, if you'd like to follow the chart, X4, X5, and X6. You'll see it's a dark shaded brown area, the Judean hills. This is now mostly what is considered the West Bank today. We might call it Judea and Samaria, Yehuda v'Shomron. The area that is the disputed territories of the West Bank. You'll see in X4 is a large city called Shechem. Abraham visited there. Joseph is buried there. We are, for all intents and purposes, forbidden from going there. It is today's Nablus. You can get in at your own risk. It is today's Nablus. You come down to X5, you see Jerusalem, which is, of course, a complicated city between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. And then just a little further south, at the border between 5 and 6, still in that column labeled X, is Hebron. And that's the place that we're talking about. And you look at these cities, this is where Abraham walked. This is where our ancestors lived and set up home. This is the area in which sometimes we can live and sometimes we can't. Now I want to bring you, if I can, to our Torah portion this week, Parshat Ekev. And I'm on page 1037. Page 1037. And here God tells us very clearly what's called the Deuteronomic covenant. If you obey these rules, God says, Vaya Ekev tishma'un et hamishpatim ha'ela. If you obey these rules and observe them carefully, the Lord your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant that God made on oath with your ancestors. Very clear. You follow the rule, good things happen. You follow the rules, we get to stay in the land of Israel. You follow the rules, we get to prosper in the land of Israel. You follow the mitzvot, success comes. Prosperity comes, health and longevity come, and of course, the hefech, the opposite, is true as well. When we fail to follow the mitzvot, all of that is taken away, including the land of Israel. And now I want you to turn the page with me, and I found this fascinating. Page 1038, chapter 7, verse 16. Moses says to our ancestors as they're preparing to enter the promised land, V'yachalta et kol ha'amim asher Hashem Elokecha notein lach. When you come into the land, the translation here says you shall destroy. But it says in the Hebrew, V'yachalta, you should consume, you should eat, devour all the people of the land in which you are going. Why? Because the only way to bring peace then was for us to devour all the people who were then living there and make sure it was only the Israelites who were living. Difficult, difficult language. The Torah goes on to tell us exactly why. Because by doing so, lo ta'avod et Elohehem, you shall not worship their gods. After 400 years of slavery, after living outside the promised land for so long, God and Moses said the only way for us to make sure Judaism can prosper is to remove all the peoples who then lived in the land and repopulate it only with Israelites. Difficult, challenging. What do we do with that today? In our fear and in our anxiety, we heard Moses saying, "You shall devour everybody who lives in the land who is not an Israelite." By the way, the Torah goes on in a fascinating parallel, and you're welcome to jump ahead with me a little bit on page 1040. And we read that the Lord your God, verse 7, is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill. This is a beautiful land which you're going to enjoy and eat everything of. You'll taste of its wheat and its grapes, its chalva. And then it says, "Ve'achalta v'savata uve'rachta." When you've eaten and had your fill, then you should give thanks. Because God is not only worried that in our fear we're going to forget God, God is also worried that in our arrogance over everything being great, we're going to forget about God. We're going to forget about our religious obligations, our moral calling. We're going to forget why Israel when things are really good. So God says, when you have eaten and had your fill, then you should give thanks. When you come into the land, you should eat and devour your enemies. And when you are enjoying the prosperity of the land, you should eat and bless and give thanks. Interesting bookends within our portion this morning. So what do we do with that? Because we're coming now back into the promised land, not after 400 years of slavery. We're coming back into the promised land after 2,000 years of exile. We're coming back into the promised land not just in order to rejuvenate our monotheism. We're coming into the promised land after the Holocaust and after all the lessons that we've learned over 2,000 years. So what do we do? How do we bring peace to the land? What does it mean? And I wrestle with you that question. There I was in Hebron, the place where Abraham first purchased land, looking upon streets in which there were Palestinian only, looking upon streets in which they were Jewish only. And we struggle, because this is the way of the Jewish people. Now, I want to bring you back, if I can, to one more verse here in the Torah. And I'm back on page 1038. The Hebrew says, "V'nashal Hashem Elokecha et hagoyim ha'el mivmanecha me'at ma'at, lo tuchal kalotam maher." The Lord your God will dislodge those people before you little by little. The translation says you will not be able to put an end to them at once. But of course, the Hebrew again, I happen to be sitting in the row with my friend, the Hebrew speaker, Alana, over here. Avram, your Hebrew's not bad, but Alana's is good. Lo tuchal kalotam. You shall not devour them at once. And of course, the English says, else the wild beasts would multiply to your hurt. It's a strange verse. You shouldn't devour them all at once, lest the wild beasts devour them, lest the wild beasts multiply to your hurt. And the commentary at the bottom of the Chumash says, if you become too adept at waging war, some of your men may come to enjoy it too much and become like wild beasts. This, I think, is among our challenges today as we think about how we bring peace in the Middle East. Is it going to be an American-style peace where we're all living together? Is it going to be a Torah-inspired peace where the only way to achieve peace is we keep everyone separate? I'm not sure, and I'd be curious your thoughts. But what I do know and what I am sure is that if we spend too much time focusing on war, then we'll all become like wild beasts. And if there's one thing I know that God wants of us, it is to transcend the animal, the wild beast within each of us, in order to live lives of holiness, of peace, of righteousness. So this Shabbat of Parshat Ekev, in which we wrestle with truly difficult texts, I pray. Adonai oz li'amo yitain. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May God grant us strength, but may God also grant us peace. And let us say together, Amen.